Welcome to the Ad Nauseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, listeners, to episode 169 of the Ad Nauseam podcast. My name is Dr. Jeff Winkle. I'm down here in a new vomitorium.
We got new digs.
I'm excited about it. I'm here, as always, with my good friend and excellent co-host, Dr. David Noe.
Yeah, Mr. Doctor.
Mr. Doctor. How you doing, Dave?
I'm doing pretty well. What are we going to call this new place? We have been to Vomitorium East, out beside Keller Lake in the early days.
That's right.
We were to Vomitorium West, a few blocks west of here at the Lutheran school that hosted us.
Yeah.
Vomitorium South.
We were for quite some time.
Yep. And we've moved locations. It's kind of a migratory or perambulatory podcast, you might say.
Yes, exactly.
Eventually, we hope to record from the back of a camel, right?
That's the ultimate goal.
That's the goal.
Right.
I think we could call this Vomitorium Central, or I'm thinking maybe the Novum Vomitorium.
Nice. I like that too. Yeah.
And we want to know if our listeners like the new digs, if they can notice any difference in the audio. And we used to have a little feature on the website. It's probably still there, for audience feedback, called You Spew 2.
That's right.
You Spew 2. And so we'd like to hear from you all and tell us what you think. Do you notice any differences in the acoustic environment?
Or in just the general vibe?
The general vibe?
Yeah.
So didn't he die in the first Appomattox campaign?
General vibe?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
He went down early.
He did, yeah. So vibe is one of those words that the kids these days are using, or dare I say, overusing.
Are you up with the lingo the kids are using?
Absolutely
really?
Not.
Oh, no.
Of course not.
Yeah.
The vibe, yeah.
Yeah, I hear that out there, but every time I try to bring up something that with my kids, I'm a couple years behind.
No, they just shake their heads in disbelief. Well, as we get started today, Jeff, I didn't ask how you're doing, but I'd like to hear.
I'm doing very well. It's I had a good Christmas break, some good family time, but I'm always itching to get back to my. Yeah. I'm a creature of routine.
That's right.
And so I'm very happy to be back in my office and back in the classroom. And
you're back in the pedagogical saddle.
I am. Yep.
Okay.
So and all is well.
Riding herd on the undergrads.
Yeah, exactly right.
All right. Yep. Very good.
Yeah.
So I've been doing some thinking lately.
Yep.
And this is not exactly a bon mot or a series of bon mots.
Okay.
But it's something. And I was thinking if anyone out there wanted to start a sports publishing house.
Yes.
I have the perfect name.
What is that?
If it hasn't been done.
Okay.
The Full Court Press.
Oh, that's great.
Isn't that pretty good?
That is pretty good.
Publishing on basketball and badminton and volleyball, really anything, but no books on swimming.
No, that wouldn't work for that.
No, that wouldn't work.
Right.
The Full Court Press.
That's a great.
Not bad. I
can't believe that nobody's done. Do you think somebody might have done that?
I didn't bother to check because I wanted to enjoy
the originality of the
idea
thought.
That I thought it up. But who knows? Maybe I saw it on a bus sign and just appropriated it.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Though I don't ever ride the bus,
no.
So that'd be a challenge. The second idea I had is whenever Alexander began to be called the Great, do you think that grated on his friends and close associates? Do you think they did some eye rolling and kind of put a hand up to their mouth and say it's more like Alexander the Average? I could just imagine.
Yeah,
right?
I can imagine that too. I think especially after he started, becoming a wastrel in Babylon.
Oh, yeah,
there was lots of side eye.
Right. People are saying Alexander the Great. Yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah, exactly. Greating.
Exactly.
Right.
And then the third little linguistic trick or something, I don't know, pun, bad dad joke, something like that is someone asked me recently, this true story, if I wanted some stir fry. I said, well, okay, stir fry sounds pretty good. What's in it? And they said, well, there's ham in it. So it's a hamster fry. And I thought, there's just something wrong with that.
There's wrong with that, yeah.
There are certain animals, specifically from the family of a rodent that I'm not intending to eat.
No, exactly. Keep those out of my wok.
Out of my stir fry, right. So the ham stir fry.
You got to if you're gonna do that, you got to separate those words.
You do,
cleanly.
Or you have to turn them around somehow.
A stir fry with ham.
Yeah, or a stir fry of ham.
Yeah.
Or stir the ham as you fry it.
Right.
Those are about the only options.
But hamster fry.
No. Okay. Well, got some interesting correspondence this week.
We did.
Yes, and it's not not quite to the level of a shout out, but perhaps eventually. But this dear woman referred to our antics on this show as nuttiness.
Nuttiness, okay.
Yeah, I liked that a lot.
I'll take it, yep.
She said some other nice things, but what really stuck with me was the nuttiness.
Really?
Yeah. So I think that if people don't like the nuttiness, we've gotten some criticism along the lines of cut the banter.
Yeah, just get to the chorus already.
Exactly.
Right.
Some folks like that. Get to the hardcore classic stuff.
Yeah.
Others, they seem to really like the banter. So maybe what we should do is produce the podcast the way that we like it.
Yes, right.
And if other people don't, they'll let us know by not listening.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we got to be us.
All right.
Yep.
So Jeff, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about an article that you forwarded to me a number of weeks ago, and it has to do with this gentleman, James Hamilton, who I had never heard of before. Were you familiar with this guy?
No, I was not.
Yeah. Who was very interested in developing a system for learning languages, particularly the classical languages, way back when. We're talking early 19th century.
Early 19th century. Yep. That's right.
And this article, the long and short of it, makes an argument that we should bring this back.
That's correct. So it was written by a man named Ernest Blum, September 1, 2008.
Right, so it's a few years old now.
17 years. Yeah. Do you know what you were doing in 2008?
I was probably sleepless with a very young child in the house. Yes. Yeah.
So he advocates in this article, which we're going to go over pretty carefully, a return to what he calls the Hamiltonian system.
Oh, that he just very he named after himself.
That's right. Okay. Of language learning, and it has a few different. It has a few different elements, you might say, in this article. So maybe we should give a bit of an overview before we dive down into the details.
Good idea.
The first one is current language education is failing, right? So students take a long time to learn a language, and they often come out on the other end with almost no ability, but lots of frustration.
Yes.
Have you experienced this either personally or in your students?
Definitely, right? It's one of these. I find one of these weird paradoxes that I find in the academy writ large. There's definitely this ethos of we need to become global citizens, right? Which you think that developing and mastering a foreign language would be an integral part of that,
right?
But at the same time, there's so much of movement. Well, do your 2 years in high school and then you're done.
Sure.
Right? So so I often found is that language learning starts too late and ends too early.
Yes.
Yep.
So I think there's a lot to be said for the notion that current language education is failing. We're going to talk specifically in this episode about Greek and Latin, our areas of expertise.
That's right.
And perhaps most focused, but not exclusive interest. But this has been going on for a long time. The idea that two basic methods of instruction in the ancient languages, the deductive, the grammar translation method, learn a rule, apply a rule, as opposed to the inductive.
Yes.
Where you throw the student into the pool before teaching them swimming lessons, and they learn as they go.
Yes.
And I would have to say that probably the Hamiltonian system, when we get down into it, is going to resemble more the inductive method, but it's a bit of a variation on it.
It is.
As we'll see.
Yep.
And what does Hamilton identify as the real problem before we get into the specifics?
Sure, the vocabulary gap.
Right.
So the research shows that students don't acquire enough vocabulary to understand complex texts, relying heavily on dictionaries and translations. And I've often found too that students getting so frustrated with kind of the having to go from this book to that book, flipping and flipping and hunting down things and moving at a snail's pace.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember that experience well when I was first learning Greek and Latin, the snail's pace. And I remember, as we've talked about before, the phenomenon of getting pretty good at recognizing the trees, right? To use an old metaphor, right? When I was deep in the Gorgias, for example, with George Harris, right? And I could tell you, okay, so this is hotan, this is hote, plus on, right? The little particle. And I was getting to where I could identify, this is a maple, right? Here's its bark, here's its roots, there's its branches. It's not an oak because it doesn't have acorns. But if you had asked me, so what's Plato talking about here? I missed the forest.
Yes, exactly.
Altogether. It took me a while to get out of that.
Yeah.
Did you have that experience?
Yeah. I don't think I ever fully got out of that experience, right? And the only time, like talking about the Gorgias, when I really realized what Plato was talking about in the Gorgias, it was when I was teaching it in translation.
Sure.
Right. And so I don't think that in my own training was very much deductive.
Right.
Learn a rule, apply a rule.
Right.
Zero in on
oftentimes then forget a rule. Unfortunately,
exactly.
for
right.
me.
Cram this vocabulary in your head, and then over the summer lose 80% of it.
Yeah.
So my own language instruction was. I mean, I had great teachers and I learned a lot, but it was very frustrating.
Yeah. So I guess like you said, once I started teaching both in translation and the text directly, then that provided a tremendous amount of pressure. And then I began to start to see the forest a little more, and not just the trees.
Right.
The Hamiltonian system offers the solution of interlinear translations. So if we had to summarize the whole episode, at this early stage, we could say Hamilton in the 19th century was producing and selling very successfully interlinear translations. And the premise is when you read Virgil or Cicero, if you can see the English, whatever the language is, right below the source language, you're going to acquire vocabulary much faster.
Yeah.
And the language generally with much more, not just speed, but also enjoyment.
Right. I thought Blum, that's our
it's Ernest Blum.
Ernest Blum. I thought it was interesting how he talks about compares kind of the language learning to other fields of study. I have some issues with this, but
I do too.
He talks about how every other or most other fields of study they're not deliberately hiding things from you,
right? And
so he makes this case of having the English right out there,
right?
Which I think in my own language instruction, my professor would have said, well, this, this is cheating because the answer is right in front of you.
Yeah.
But this is a whole different approach to absorbing language.
And if we could skip to the very end for a minute, this is something perhaps for listeners to keep in mind, that Ernest Blum is a writer. This is his biography, and holds a Master of Arts degree in comparative French and German literature from the University of Chicago.
Yeah.
So I'm of the school that, so to speak, that the ancient languages should not be learned in a fundamentally different way from the modern languages.
Yeah.
So what that means is, I don't think Blum is disqualified from talking about Greek and Latin pedagogy just because his degrees are in French and German.
Right.
However, I do think that there are some significant enough differences that I wasn't completely persuaded by Blum by the time I got to the end.
I'll be really interested to kind of hear where you fall. I thought one striking thing is in the entire article, he never talks about spoken language.
No, he doesn't.
This is all kind of a
on the page
reader response.
That's correct.
Approach. Right.
Yep, that's correct. So that's kind of an overview. Let's dive down deeper into the article now. Jeff, you want to start by reading the first paragraph for us?
Yeah. So Blum starts out. He writes, "In this country and abroad, there is a sense of malaise, if not crisis, about the state of foreign language education." Now I'm going to stop there. Dave, do you agree with that? Or in 2008, is this true?
2008.
Is it still true? Is it worse? Is it better?
I think it's it depends upon whom you ask. Among my former colleagues at Calvin University and in other language departments, Spanish, French, German, etc., I would say there's absolutely malaise because they are very interested and dedicated experts, as you and I were. But the student interest is at an all-time low.
Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, if you go on Facebook, Twitter, X.com, these kinds of places, there's an enormous resurgence of interest in the classics generally, but not in foreign language education. So it seems to me that the moment is ripe for the popularizing of the study of Greek and Latin.
Yeah.
Even as there is this kind of malaise in academia proper.
Yeah.
That's my take. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I was interested in your take because you're still knee deep in it, and
yes,
you're very much involved in trying
seeking to teach it. Yeah,
yes, and popularizing it with your programs and such.
Doing my best. So you want to continue with what Blum says?
Yes, Blum continues. Critics note that it takes too long to acquire a foreign language, that the results hardly justify the investment of time and effort, and that students are unable to apply what they learn. But this kind of disgruntlement was already rife at the end of the 17th century. So,
I like that.
Yes. Yeah. I do like the word disgruntlement.
Well, I'm wondering about the combination of disgruntlement being rife. I wonder if Blum is mixing some metaphors here.
But I like the way it hits my ears.
Yeah. Right? It's rife with disgruntlement.
Yeah.
So the critics say it takes too long to acquire a foreign language. That's the first one. And the results hardly justify the investment of time and effort. Students are unable to apply what they learn.
Yep.
So I get this kind of comment all the time, right? Well, with Google Translate and AI and so forth,
yes.
Why does anyone need to learn a foreign language at all?
Right.
And, in part, I agree with that in the sense that if your purpose in learning a foreign language is simply to do something like order a coffee and a croissant, in Paris, you're not going to need it anymore.
Yeah.
I have these Bluetooth earbuds. You probably have a pair too. That the AI in them will apparently translate in real time.
It's incredible.
So that if I hear someone speaking Spanish, it will tell me what they said directly into my ear. Now, I don't know about the accuracy, but I imagine within just a few years, the accuracy is going to be probably better than any human could do.
Yeah.
It seems to me. But that was never my purpose for studying a foreign language.
Yeah.
It was to access great literature and enjoy it for that reason. And I'm not sure that AI can teach you how to do that.
Right.
I doubt it.
Yeah. It's that, I think we've used this phrase on the show before, is that this notion, language isn't math.
Right.
And I think a lot of people come to it with the assumption that language is math. You just use this word because that word means this word in another language.
Right.
And there's this one-to-one correspondence.
Right.
There's I had never heard this either. Later in the article, he talks about this two-word Italian phrase, traduttore.
Yes, right.
The translator is a traitor.
Yes, right.
That's right on.
Of course it is. Yeah, it's an artistic endeavor. And frankly, the Google Translate editions or versions of Greek and Latin that I've seen are terrible.
Yeah.
And even the good ones are clunky.
Yes.
Right? The ones that are generally accurate, they have no art to them.
Exactly.
So,
right.
But if you want to continue with that paragraph, he brings in John Locke.
John Locke, right. So, who in Some Thoughts Concerning Education, which he wrote in 1692, wrote, "How is it possible that a child should be chained to the oar 7, 8, or 10 years of the best years of his life to get a language or two, which, I think, might be had at a great deal cheaper rate of pains and time, and be learned almost in playing?"
Mm-hmm. So we're going on what, 330 years since that time. And John Locke was saying back then, you're chained to the oar, right? Like trying to pull yourself across the lake of learning a language or two, which of course means Greek and Latin.
Yeah.
And you can't really do it successfully.
No.
Mustn't there be some better way?
Right.
So along comes then James Hamilton in the
over a
early
century
19th
later.
century.
Yes.
That's correct.
Yep.
And Blum describes him as an obscure, peripatetic businessman by the name of James Hamilton, interjected himself into the controversy in both the United States and his native Britain. Says Blum, his influence, his attacks on the dominant method of teaching foreign languages and the publication by his disciples of classical texts embodying his methodology extended well into the 20th century. With a fiery, polemic style, he made waves. Now here is Blum quoting Hamilton. Hamilton says, "Mankind are thirsty for real knowledge and will not long put up with a shadow of it. Either the teacher will find out a mode of communicating a knowledge of the learned languages in a shorter time and more efficaciously than has been hitherto done, or the study of these languages will be relinquished altogether."
It's very prescient.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Because you think it's happening, it's being given up?
Definitely, right. And I think even his talk about finding a way to do this more quickly and more efficaciously. I think the word that he uses is I think that's what perhaps technology is aiming for in some sense, or kind of doing it for us, I suppose. But yeah, I mean that sounds like a complaint that could be heard today,
right?
And ring very, very true.
So what did Hamilton do then to try to bridge this gap, to fill the pothole on the road to language acquisition?
He came up with these interlinear volumes.
Right.
He had the Greek or the Latin with an English translation between the lines, and you had it right in front of you.
Now, you know the lobes, of course.
Yes.
Many people who study languages, as we have, use the lobes. Did you go through a lobe phase?
I did go through a lobe phase.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, and if you get some of those older lobes,
right,
they're not very helpful.
No, because they leave out all the racy parts.
Well, they
put them into French.
They put them in French or Italian, right?
Right.
But even you have to end up in some ways translating their style of English.
Because it's archaic.
Yes, exactly.
Sure.
But some of the newer lobes that when I was working on Apuleius, there was a lobe translation that of the Metamorphoses. I think it came out in 1999, which was great.
Sure.
Yeah.
So it's not an interlinear.
No.
But the text is en face, right? You've got the Greek or the Latin on the left-hand side, and you've got the English on the right-hand side. So you can easily cover it up.
Yeah.
And I found that to be a pretty fast way to read a lot of Greek and Latin, because I knew a lot of words, but I didn't know them all.
Right.
And some of the syntax. See, he doesn't talk about syntax. And to me, that's really the issue with the Hamiltonian system, is the difference in syntax between Greek, Latin, and English.
Right.
I don't want to go too far on that now until we get further along in the article.
Right.
But that's the Achilles heel of the interlinear approach, I would say.
Right, because I believe Blum talks about in Hamilton, he also messed with the ancient word order.
Yes, he did.
Right. So
a lot, which is to rob it of much of its sweetness, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
We can probably find some interesting, metaphors. Here's a possible one, right? If you go to eat a watermelon, I don't know if you remember eating watermelon as a kid, but for me, part of the fun was there were no seedless watermelons when we were kids. Mm-hmm. This takes us way back. And your mom or your dad would take out this huge knife,
yes,
cut the thing in half, and then as I got older, I got to the point where I could wield the watermelon knife because it's not safe for a little kid.
Yeah,
and then you eat it down to the rind, and you got to make those decisions. Am I going to go all the way into the white?
Yes.
I'm guessing that you stopped when there was a lot of red still left and threw it away and went on to the next one.
I was a rind guy.
Were you a rind?
I was a rind guy. Yeah.
I'm surprised.
I remember my brother.
I was a rinder too.
Were you?
Yeah.
My brother thought when I would do this, he'd say, "That's gross."
Yeah, but the white is a nice little contrast.
Exactly.
With the delicious red. Okay, so my point here with the metaphor.
Okay.
Is the syntax of Greek and Latin is where, to my mind, a lot of the beauty resides. Mm-hmm. If you just rearrange it so that it's more palatable, it's like buying your box of watermelon at the store, all pre-cubed and pre-cut in the little container.
Yeah,
you're dispensing with a lot of the inconvenience of having to cut it open and spit out the seeds and so forth. But you're also dispensing with a lot of the charm of the whole experience.
Good. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Despite myself, I'm sounding more like Wendell Berry all the time. You know who he is?
I do. I would imagine you don't have much...
I don't like him. But I'm starting to sound like him. Maybe I could be Gary Schmidt.
You say like the gentleman farmer poet?
That's correct. All you need is 80 acres and a mule.
Right.
Hopefully we've alienated some listeners, because there have to be some... devout Wendell Berryites. But back to Hamilton.
Yeah, I like this bit from the third paragraph in the article where he talks about John Stuart Mill in his autobiography talks about learning German through the Hamiltonian system.
Yes.
But it was also controversial in his own day.
But it had become synonymous, says Blum, with interlinear translations. So the Hamiltonian system is the interlinear.
Right.
Do you remember seeing any interlinears? We talked about the lobes, but any actual interlinears in your study of Greek and Latin?
No. The one thing, this is my example, is not interlinear, but it reminded me of the criticisms. Is I remember in graduate school doing Virgil and using the Clyde Farr text.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember I had a professor that said, you can't use Farr.
Right.
Because all of the grammar help is right there on the page.
There's a lot of it, let's be honest.
There is a lot. Right?
However, you get some speed.
Yes.
Right? I think we read 3 whole books of the Aeneid that way.
Yeah.
And now there's a tremendous amount of weight placed on the author, the scholar, because if Farr makes a mistake, you're stuck with that for a long time.
Indeed, right?
Because that's your only sort of conduit to what Virgil really means.
Right. No, I remember I loved the Farr text simply because you could move so much faster.
Yes, that was nice.
You could cover more ground.
That was nice. A similar text for Homer is the famous Alan Rogers Benner. That's what it is. It's the Benner text. It has books 1, 9, and 22 of the Iliad, which are the action books 1, 9, and 22.
Yeah.
And I used that as an undergrad and have taught out of it many times. It's like Farr in the amount of help that it gives you. And so you can go fast, but not an interlinear, because, and this wouldn't therefore meet the Hamiltonian standard, because the helps are below the text. They're not right next to it.
Yes.
So it's a little bit slower.
Right.
Now, there are many interlinear New Testaments. Have you ever seen one of those?
No, I think Blum mentions that in passing, but I've never seen that.
Yes, I don't use one. I don't like it. I don't recommend using an interlinear New Testament because of this question of syntax. The syntax is so different that it doesn't really represent English if you just place the English word below the Greek word. You still have to rearrange the English words to make sense of it.
Yeah.
It's very awkward.
Right. So this was I was reading this article. I had never saw an interlinear. I think that if somebody had suggested it, my sense would have been that sounds unhelpful to me because you're not working for it.
Right. Well, we looked up one, James Hamilton, The Fables of Aesop, adapted to the Hamiltonian system. And later on in the episode today, we're going to take a look at it and go over it together on the air and see what the audience thinks.
Yeah.
But on the second page of the article, we get a pretty good idea of what some of Hamilton's critics thought.
Right. It was not all praise across the board.
Right.
So Blum writes, virtually out of print today. What I thought was really interesting. I think he even talks about how, in terms of like original printings, there's like 3 in Great Britain and there's 1 volume that survives in America.
Interesting.
And so virtually out of print today, interlinears in Hamilton's time and beyond were derogatively branded by the critics as, quote, crutches, cribs, and ponies, and a number of unmentionable terms. I gotta admit, I don't understand the pony.
I think a pony is a small horse that you ride on that gets you from one place to the next.
Oh, okay.
It's not really your main mode of transportation.
Gotcha.
I guess that's what it is.
Right.
You're carried on a pony if you're not big and strong and going on your own. Maybe.
Gotcha. To be like a tricycle.
Yeah.
Or something. Okay.
That'd be good. Your training wheels, right?
There we go.
I've gotten the notion of crutch. That's a crutch. It's a crib, right?
Yeah.
I've had professors say that to me in the learning of Greek and Latin, and they've even said you can use a crutch, you can use a crib. And when I teach students, I say, you go look at the translation when you're stuck.
Yeah.
Because if you have exhausted all possible avenues, there's no sense sitting there for hours on end without any idea of, what it means.
Yeah, exactly.
Just don't make it your first instinct, your first action.
Yep.
Okay, and as Blum goes on, then he says, in view of these endemic problems would mean the reliance on dictionaries, consulting translations, and so forth, the demise of Hamilton's interlinear books leaves an untimely lacuna in our educational system. In essence, the Hamiltonian book was designed as a formatting scheme to maximize the amount of information available to the reader of a foreign language. Hamilton's interlinear format offered a royal road to the great texts of Greece and Rome. His format could serve as a template for access to all of the world's important texts in an era when these texts are in precipitous decline. So Blum here has a project in mind, right? He's saying, let's readopt the Hamiltonian system as a way to make these texts popular once again.
Right. And it also seems to be an implicit emphasis on quantity.
Yes.
Right. As we were talking about, this is a way to move rapidly and get through many, many texts.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, can you share some of the specifics of how the Hamiltonian system was intended to work?
Yeah. So Blum writes, unlike most bilingual books, where the translation is on one page and the original text on the opposite page, like a lobe.
Like a lobe, yeah.
The Hamiltonian system brought both texts in close contact. For example, Hamilton adjusted the typesetting of the two texts so that a word or phrase of the original fits just above the English equivalent. Hamilton also revised the word order of the original text to conform to the word order of modern languages, overcoming perhaps the greatest difficulty for modern students of classics.
Yes, so that's it.
That's it.
Syntax.
Yes.
Word order is everything, right? So when I teach, I try to, this is not something that's original to me. I don't remember where I learned it, probably from Holtzmark, but I try to get students to see the language in 4 different registers. You have, first of all, the lexemes. So this is just, the basic meaning of the word, like lupus. You look it up in the dictionary, wolf,
yes.
Right? Then secondly, after lexeme comes grammar. So in Latin, lupus could be nominative, but if it were luporum, be genitive plural.
Yes.
Third thing is syntax. Is lupus the first word in the sentence, like I see a wolf, lupum video, or is it the second, video lupum? That's syntax, word order.
Yep.
And the last is semantics. The first 3 are supposed to serve the last one, which is meaning.
Yeah.
Right? You try to get some meaning out of it.
Right.
An excessively simple example like that is maybe helpful. Lupum video, I see the wolf. Right. So Hamilton would turn that around and make it every time video lupum.
Yes.
Now, the student, therefore, could learn the meaning of the two words faster and not have to worry about looking up either the verb or the noun. But would they have any real sense of how Latin is constructed?
Right. It seems that Hamilton's in this approach, or maybe he would say, well, just on this level, he's not even all that interested in who the author is.
No.
Right? So it doesn't, in some ways, it doesn't really matter.
No.
The author is the story, the narrative is just simply there to soak the student in just a basic
vocabulary.
Really. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And basic understanding of what these words mean.
Right.
So you're right. This approach on its own, if left there, it drains it of any kind of artistry.
Yes, there's really no artistry. Now, a fair rejoinder to that would be when you're trying to teach someone the basics of a language, artistry is not your main goal.
Exactly. That's true. Yeah.
However, I don't know, in your interaction with your children, your three sons, when they were learning to speak, I imagine that you did some grammar correction now and then.
Yeah.
Some parents do a lot more than others. Some do too much. Maybe I was guilty of that.
Yeah.
In any event, though, I found that it's really dangerous to someone's development if you're always deliberately speaking down to them.
Right.
You can't do that all the time. If you want someone to get good at something, the learning edge has to be a little bit ahead of their ability.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I assume this would be the case in music. If they master some scales, you have to always be moving the goalpost a little bit so they can reach toward it.
Exactly. And I think the music comparison is apt, is that I've often found myself getting becoming a better musician by playing with people who are much better than I am, right? So with language,
it's true of everything.
You talk about like with my boys, one of the things that Beck and I, we'd fight about it, but I disagreed about it. Is I would the boys would ask me a question, I would answer,
right,
and then Beck would, who if she was listening, she said, Jeff, he doesn't know what that word means.
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
And so, but in my sense was, well, he can figure it out.
Yeah, it's a fine line, right? I wouldn't say in every instance tough, just lump it,
right.
But I also wouldn't be quick every time to give them the meaning, because that's to shortchange some of the struggle, that it takes to get good at doing that.
Right.
I don't know.
Right. I mean, I think that's at the heart of what Bloom is writing about. I think one of the places where I disagreed with him is that he says that too much of modern language learning forces students to fill in the gaps,
right,
or maybe intuit too much.
Well, yeah, I know that's what he says. You're right,
and I don't know to what degree I agree with that. And then he's saying that the Hamiltonian system is that the criticism was that it just gives you everything, right? There's no.
So where's the fine line?
Where's the fine line? Right. And I think Bloom was also a bit off mark when he seems to suggest that all or most other areas of studies don't ask you to intuit. Right. I thought a lot of my mathematical education involved having to kind of do lots of kind of guesswork along the way and intuit things what particular symbols meant.
Right.
So I don't know if he was on the mark with that. I do think that language instruction is a different animal.
Yes.
Than
it has a strong element of imitation.
Yeah.
Like pretty much any other kind of learning.
Yeah.
But it's something that we were designed to do. In a way that other things don't come naturally.
Yeah,
everyone can speak. Not everybody can read. I don't mean everyone, but the vast majority of people can speak whatever language they're exposed to.
Yeah,
reading's a very different animal, but not everybody can do some of the other sorts of things that are taught.
Yeah.
Technical skills and so forth.
Right.
And people are very, very selective in how they learn language as compared to other sorts of areas of human knowledge, I would guess.
Yeah, very true.
Much more self-directed.
Yep.
Well, speaking of self-directed,
yes,
it's time for the ads.
Do it.
This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you by Racial Coffee. Jeff, we have reached a monumental milestone in our coffee relationship.
We have?
Yes, you're using the 4 now.
Oh, that's right. Yes, that's what you're talking about.
Tell me about it. What do you think so far?
It's a beautiful machine.
You like it?
Yeah, so it came to my doorstep.
Right.
And
mid-December, mid to late December?
Yeah, and my wife found it, and her
Okay.
first question was like, well, why do we need another coffee machine, right? And I said,
I may have received a similar question.
and I said, listen, I'm going to take it out of the house. This is going to be
Right.
in my office,
Right.
And at my office there's a community coffee machine.
Is it a nub?
A nub?
NNUB?
Is that a brand?
It's bun spelled backwards.
It is. It is not
One of those boily kinds.
It's very
so boily.
boily and scorchy.
Yeah.
Right. And I will use it in times
Okay.
of desperation.
Right.
But now no longer. And I cleared out a space on my desk.
You put the ratio 4 there.
Ratio 4 there. It's the size is perfect.
It is nice, isn't it?
It's small. It's attractive.
What do you think about the water tank that's removable?
Yeah. Oh, that's perfect.
It's good, isn't it?
Right. One of the things that I hate about most coffee machines is the filling of the tank.
Yes.
I'm often spilling things all over the place. And
Well, because in order to make it, fit in a certain spot, they have to design the tank in a way that's nearly inaccessible.
Yes,
And
exactly.
then the carafe is kind of globe shaped, and you're trying to pour it into this tiny little orifice.
right. It doesn't work.
No, it doesn't.
But no, I love everything about the 4 is so user friendly.
Yeah.
So for that the coffee drinker who maybe if you're the only coffee drinker in your house,
Right.
or if you want it in your office away or your home office,
Like a secondary station.
it is perfect.
Yeah.
I love it, and it's the same high quality, the same great taste. It's just
Same one press of a button.
yes.
Do you notice how quickly that thing responds?
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes I try to press it and take my finger away before it starts. See if I can get my finger away before it starts processing, and I can't.
It is designed for speed.
It's lightning.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
And just about 4 minutes, you've got a perfect cup of coffee.
Exactly. Right. Just the other day is I was kind of rushing around before I went to class.
Right.
And I thought, am I going to have time to brew a cup? And man, I had like 5 minutes before class.
Right.
Hit the button, and I was walking out the door down
That's
the hall.
incredible.
It was great.
Have you gotten any compliments on it? Any comments? Anyone, scoping it out?
My friend across the hall could
Okay.
notice. I mean, this is for me. This is not for me.
Okay. This is not the community
My
coffee
colleague
maker.
noticed it and said, "Oh, that's a new addition. Was that a Christmas gift?" And I said, "Well, kind of."
Yeah.
Does
he or she know about ad nauseum?
She does,
All
right?
right.
And so I told her the story, and
Yeah.
and she was very impressed.
Excellent.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, I want to read a little copy here
Yeah.
from one Emily Caldwell, who wrote this recently in The Manual, in which it's an online journal of coffee and so forth. She interviewed Mark. And she says, designed for the coffee enthusiast, Ratio coffee machines are known for brewing rich, delicious coffee and providing style on your countertop. Some even call Ratio's makers the Porsche of pour-over coffee makers. I interviewed Mark Helweg, the founder of Ratio Coffee Machines, to get insight into the brand's values and how they craft each coffee maker in their product line. Jeff, what are you driving these days?
What am I driving?
Yeah,
I'm kind of a beat up Honda Civic.
It's a Honda Civic, isn't it?
It is,
And
yeah.
also maybe the other family vehicle is an Odyssey?
It is. It's a Toyota Sienna.
There you go.
Yes.
I'm driving a Chrysler Town and Country.
Okay.
Which is getting onto its last leg.
Yeah.
And a nicer Hyundai, but no Porsche.
No Porsche.
However, I've got both a Ratio 8 and a Ratio 4.
Yes.
And so I have all I need in terms of style and aesthetics.
Exactly. Your garage is full of
That's correct.
magnificent things. Right. As
That's
is
correct.
mine. Yeah.
So how about we give away a Ratio 4? We've been talking about the great product, and we're going to give the link so you can go get a nice discount. But we're giving one away as well.
Yep.
Jeff, what's that about?
That so if one of our listeners wants to throw their hat in the ring, all they need to do is they need to email you,
That's correct.
Dave at adnauseum.com. Don't forget that V in
I decided
there.
to take care of that for you.
Yes, and if you send Dave the code word,
Right.
which is quatuor, which is the Latin word for 4.
Yes, and if this were the Hamiltonian system, James Hamilton would have put 4 directly beneath quatuor
Right.
and made them the same size, even though they differ by several letters.
That's right. Yeah, right.
So QUA
Yes.
TTUOR,
Yep.
Dave at adnauseum.com, quatuor, and you will be entered into the giveaway, which is going to take place in early March. Now, Jeff, I got to tell you,
Yep.
we have a very small number of entrants right now.
We do. Okay.
Yes, which means the chances are still pretty high that you, listener, could win one.
Yeah.
So you got to throw your hat into the ring.
Right. So, David@navseam.com, and with the code word Quatuor.
That's right. We even got a husband and wife team try to send in 2 entries.
Oh.
I said, wait a minute. No, it's limit 1 per family.
Yeah, I can't blame them for trying though.
No, of course not.
Right.
But maybe they're not in it for the giveaway. They can go to racialcoffee.com/ad nauseam. ADNAVSEAM, racialcoffee.com/ad nauseam. Jeff, then they need to enter this coupon code.
Yes. ANRATIO, ANRATIO 2025.
That's right. ANRATIO 2025, and you'll get $20 off your entire order.
Check it out. This episode of Ad Nauseam is also brought to you by Hackett Publishing. I love this company. Dave, I know you love this company. These people have been with us since the very beginning of our humble little show here.
That's right.
And they took
going on 5 years.
Yes, and they took a chance on us and said, yes, we would love to support you and your desire to bring the classics to a wider audience.
That's right.
Because they say, that's what we do.
Exactly.
And that's what we've been doing since 1970, I believe.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
Yeah, they're as old as I am.
Wow.
They're
wow.
54 years old, going on 54 years old. And bringing the classics to the public with wonderful erudite translations, an attractive package, and I think perhaps most importantly for many people, affordable.
Exactly.
Right.
So you're not going to have to break the bank in order to break through to great classics.
Exactly.
You can find a wide range of wonderful titles. We have the Lombardo edition of the Iliad and the Odyssey and Ovid's Metamorphoses. We should go back to another couple of vignettes from Ovid.
That'd be great.
Those are always fun.
Yep.
You can get a number of other things. You can get our friend Diane's new translation of Aristophanes. You've got the Hackett edition of The Republic by C.D.C. Reeve, the new Aristotle series. You name it, they have it, as well as non-classic stuff.
Exactly. Right. So I always order the Lombardo Odyssey translation for my myth classes. I've just started a new semester.
All right.
And one of the things that my students always cringe at is the cost of academic textbooks.
Right.
And so they saw that I was requiring for myth not 1 but 2 texts, and one of them was the Odyssey. And I said, hey, listen, let me pull it up even on Amazon on the screen up there, and they can get this amazing translation in a beautiful package for about $8.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
It's less than a Big Mac combo meal.
Indeed,
much more satisfying.
Yes, absolutely.
So, listener, if you want to score some great volumes for yourself, continue to build your classics library, do yourself a favor and go to hackettpublishing.com, HACKETT publishing.com. Browse their catalog, put some titles in your little grocery basket, and at checkout, you need to enter this coupon code.
AN2025.
And Jeff, what will that get them?
2 amazing things that will get them 20% off their entire order and also free shipping.
Check it out. Okay, Jeff, as we get back into it, we need to take a look at what Hamilton says about reading. Because as you were commenting earlier in the episode, for Hamilton, it seems to be all about reading and not about speaking.
Yes. Yep. Shall I read this?
Yes, please.
So this is Hamilton says, reading, he writes, is the only effectual source of instruction. It is the true spring, it is the pure spring of 9/10 of our intellectual enjoyments. Neither should it be sacrificed to grammar or composition, nor to getting by heart anything whatever, because these are utterly unobtainable before we have read a great deal.
Yes. So what do you make of that?
Well, I mean, it's definitely a challenge to, I think, conventional kind of text-based language instruction. It would see like they would look at this and say, well, he's putting the cart before the horse, right?
Right.
You're running before you learn to walk. But the note I made under here too is, now the text that you use in your Latin teaching, your online and the Moss method and the LLPSI that you use is the Orberg text.
Yes, right? Orberg, Hans Orberg.
It strikes me overlaps with that in that both of those methods have you reading from day one.
Exactly.
Right.
There's a definite similarity.
Right. So and it also
however you're not reading it with the translation, right below the lines. So you have a little bit of time for that intuition and that stretching to take place.
Yeah.
So that you can try to learn on your own what it means. And Moss explicitly says that the good student should use his mind more than his thumbs. In other words, you're not always flipping to the lexicon to find the definition of a given word.
Right.
Give it some time for, educated guessing to work its work its wonders.
Right. Where Hamilton apparently would say, would disagree with that.
He would disagree.
Right, because you
need to know the meaning right away.
Right away, and it's right there in front of you.
And get on with it.
Right, exactly. I mean, I never learned with the Hamiltonian method, but it would seem it would require a kind of striking discipline of its own. You do have to be able to, in some ways, kind of read them both languages at the same time.
Yes, I would find that slow, and a little bit frustrating.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Another possible criticism, and I don't want to be completely down on the whole project, but we have to, take it as it comes, is that for my own children, whom I taught Greek and Latin, they all had a really good pronunciation of Latin, I think, before they had a full comprehension. And in fact, several of them could read Latin better, not with comprehension, but just the actual pronunciation of the words.
Yeah.
And more fluidly before they could read English at that speed.
Huh.
And it was because they were just being taught to pronounce the words by ear.
Yeah.
And I think this is a little bit different than Hamilton because, we didn't delay comprehension, but comprehension and proper articulation of the words were separate activities.
Right.
And he seems to treat them as the same.
Yeah.
Am I making sense?
No, you are. It brings up two things that that Blum doesn't really mention in his article here at all. One is he doesn't mention the spoken, the auditory and the oral element of it, and also he does not talk about anything around like, well, for a child when this should begin.
Yes,
right. And I'm wondering, especially since you have a lot of experience with spoken Latin,
right?
How does that element of learning the language, how would that play into that Hamiltonian system, or do you see that as lesser, as better, as a complement?
Right. Well, what he says at the end of the portion you just read is perhaps a little bit of a window into his thinking. He says that getting by heart anything, learning grammar or composition, these are utterly unobtainable before we have read a great deal. So maybe he's talking more about order of priority.
Yeah.
So be taught to read a lot and gain some sense of vocabulary. Then try composition exercises, learn about the ablative absolute and the supine with verbs of motion to express purpose and so forth. Maybe do it that way. But there's almost no emphasis on speech.
Right.
And in terms of the rate of acquisition, I think he's just wrong about the difference between literacy and fluency. Reginald Foster, the late Reginald Foster, he used to like to say that any homeless Roman, or his example was a prostitute, any Roman prostitute in the 1st century AD could speak a Latin, more complete and beautiful than anyone can today.
Yes.
And the idea was he was trying to stress the fact that literacy and academic kind of knowledge are quite different than the ability to speak a language and to manipulate it at a high level. And I think he's just self-evidently right. I don't think there's any arguing about that.
Yeah.
Now, how to get to that sort of fluency is a different question, but it seems to me that Hamilton doesn't separate them.
Right.
Not that I can tell.
What have you witnessed in terms of your teaching, if you were to think about comparing your students that you've used a spoken approach versus a purely textual approach, and what works better for the largest number? I mean,
the spoken works much, much better.
Does it really?
But often it doesn't do everything that people hope it will do. It's still hard to learn.
Yeah.
And it's still not going to be easy because it's a second language.
Yeah.
And I find that, the more compounding difficulties have to do with the environment in which they attempt to learn. And usually because they start when they're too old. That can be a real handicap. And the other is that they're not doing it in a focused enough way. It is one class out of 5, or it's 2 hours, maybe 3 hours per week maximum.
Yeah.
I remember reading Schliemann's autobiography. We've talked about it before. And his method of language acquisition, getting a little far afield from Hamilton, was that when he was trying to learn a new modern language, he would look at nothing else but that language for 7 to 8 weeks. He would hear no one speaking anything but French. He would read nothing but French. He would write nothing but French.
Yeah.
So he didn't follow Hamilton's system of pure reading, but it was the exclusion of any other kind of intellectual interference in terms of language acquisition.
Right.
So that works for sure. I'm very convinced.
Akin to like a Spanish immersion program.
Yes.
Where the kids are learning all their subjects only in Spanish.
Well, and to the extent that you don't read an English newspaper, you don't have, you don't use your phone, which has apps in English. You strictly monitor any kind of influence that isn't in the target language.
Yes.
So, that works for sure.
Right.
And I don't think Hamilton is thinking in those terms, because he says in the next paragraph, as reading is the source of all real instruction, so it is also the sole, the only means by which the words of a language can be acquired. The man who has not learned to read knows only those words which he has learned in his conversation. His vocabulary is smaller than can well be imagined. I think he's just wrong about that. I don't understand why he would say something of that sort. The average American uses 3,000 to 4,000 different words in their vocabulary in a given day.
Right.
More advanced speakers would maybe use 10,000 different words, something like that. But a 3 to 4-year-old child can use 4,000 words and can't read.
Right.
So I just don't understand.
Yeah.
I don't understand how he could be correct about this. So I could see Hamilton's interlinear method as a good way to read fast and pick up vocabulary. But in terms of depth of understanding the language, I don't even see that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of the things I thought was kind of lacking in the Blum article in talking about Hamilton, he never really kind of defines, what exactly did Hamilton see as the end goal with all of this, and how did it? I mean, he says something in that same paragraph about Hamilton did not oppose the studying of grammar, only its timing. So maybe in this interlinear approach is Hamilton would say, well, this is just your first step. You'll get to all that other things, but this is the best way to begin.
Right.
All right, Dave, I'm looking at the clock. We need to kind of cover some other things here.
That's right.
But Blum talks about this thing called Ziff's Law, Z-I-P-F.
Ziff's Law.
What's this all about?
Well, I'm going to quote from Blum. That seems the best way to go. Ziff's Law tells us that the frequency with which distinct vocabulary words occur in book-length texts and larger corpora declines in a generally regular, fixed, and simple way as the number of vocabulary words in the text increases. That seems a little opaque, but Blum gives us an example. For example, the second most frequent word in a text occurs, by and large, 1/2 as often as the most frequent word.
Wait, so maybe language is math.
The third most frequent word occurs 1/3 as often as the most frequent word, the fourth word 1/4, the 10th word 1/10, the 1,000th word 1,000th, etc. In other words, Ziff's law states that the frequency with which any given vocabulary word occurs in a text is inversely proportional to that word's rank in the vocabulary list, starting from the most frequent word. Okay, so far so good.
Yeah.
But then Blum goes on to tell us what the consequences are. Jeff, can you read that part?
Yes, there are two overriding consequences of Ziff's law, each with a contradictory impact on language learners. Only a few words account for the overwhelming bulk of words used in a language. So if you stop there, it would be fantastic.
Right.
I only have to be responsible
for it.
It's easy, right? But hold on. In English, for example, the word "the" accounts for 7% of all the words used, and only 10 words account for up to 23%. For many languages, a rule of thumb is that a mere 100 to 150 words account for around half of any text. So I read that, and I was thinking, okay, if I am building a language teaching program from scratch, start with that list of 150 words and learn them as quickly as you can.
Yeah, well, let me talk about that in a personal way, if I may, real quickly. When I teach Latin, I give my students the list of the 299 most frequent words.
Okay.
299, right? I borrowed it from someone else. It's based on Nepos, Caesar, Sallust, Virgil, Livy, and Cicero.
Okay.
And you got to learn the 299, and you got to know them like the back of your hand.
Yeah.
And it works. However, some of the words are kind of difficult to know out of context, like que, right? The enclitic que.
Yeah.
You want to say, the cat and the dog. You can say feles et canis, or you can say feles canisque.
Yes.
So it's kind of hard to memorize it and use it well without context.
Now, do you start your students there without any kind of grammar instruction?
No, I start speaking Latin to them, but I soon add that in.
Okay.
Learn these 299, and I have them memorize Latin also, things that are familiar. Psalm 23, Psalm 100, Lord's Prayer, things like that.
Gotcha.
Just to get them using the language orally. And when I, have taught kids how to read English, I have them use high-frequency word lists like the, because some of these words just have to be spelled.
Yes.
Because English is so unphonetic.
Right, exactly.
How are you going to spell the? Is it THA? That makes good sense.
Yeah.
No, that's not right.
Right.
THUH? I don't know.
Right.
Anyway,
yeah.
the notion of high-frequency words, if this is part of Hamilton's system, then I'm on board, because that makes a lot of sense.
So Bloom uses this.
But he goes on.
This example says, in the Greek New Testament, only 319 words account for just under 80% of the text.
Right.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah, so Bruce Metzger has this little book, Lexical Aids for Students of New Testament Greek, and it's brilliant. It has 500, right? The first words that the words that occur 500 times or more, and I have my Greek students memorize that exhaustively.
Yeah.
Anthropos is right near the top.
Yeah.
Man, and theos, God. They're in the top 10.
Yep.
Makes good sense.
Yep. And so, Bloom says, this is, of course, a welcome situation for getting one's feet wet in the language. So this is the good news.
Yeah. So now what's the bad news? The second consequence.
Why don't you read that next paragraph?
I've been talking a lot. I'd like to hear you read it.
But the second consequence of this law is troubling for those who would master the reading of languages. When one gets beyond the high frequency words, the overwhelming number of vocabulary words that we encounter are low frequency words. In the case of the Greek New Testament, for example, 319 words account for almost 80% of the text, but it takes 5,118 infrequently used and unfamiliar words to cover the remaining 20%. In large corpora, the words that occur only once, so-called hapax legomena, Greek for said once, account for half of the total vocabulary.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
discouraging.
That lets a lot of the air out of the balloon.
Yes. So I guess Hamilton's response to that then is just have the person read it all.
Read it all.
And even if the word only occurs once, you see it in context.
Yes.
I don't know if that's really going to do it. And he doesn't say anything about engaging images. There's a long tradition. We talked about it in Cranks for the Memories, remember?
Oh, yes.
Something like episode 18.
Yeah, way back when.
William Perkins in Memory Systems.
Yeah, that's right.
Thomas Aquinas says something along the lines of, it is impossible to know something without an image. So when I think about words, the ones that I know really well, I have an image in my mind of that word in some sense.
Yes.
And so if you want to learn some rare New Testament Greek word, this is not especially rare. It's machaira. It's a short sword. It occurs in Ephesians 6. Machaira. You've got to have some way to get a handle on that, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I don't think just reading it is going to do it.
Right.
You've got to have a pantomime, or you've got to draw an image.
Exactly.
Something to cement it.
Yeah, I remember a passage from C.S. Lewis. I forget the book that it's from, but he was talking about a similar thing, and he was talking about the Greek word nous. So he said, word nous is, don't think of in your mind the English word boat spelled out.
Right.
And he used something like, think of a trireme coming over the waves.
Exactly.
And so he had this very dramatic, mental, like cinematic image.
Right.
And he says, if you can nail that down, well, now you've got that word.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And Hamilton's system, so far as I know, has nothing to do with images whatsoever. Whereas the Orberg book, for example, on the very first page, you see insula, and then there's a picture of an insula, an island.
Yeah.
It's identified. So now that image is emblazoned in the student's mind.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have to reach for the English word. So
I hadn't thought of that, but that's another huge gap here.
It is.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's because reading is prioritized. I think that maybe Hamilton's system is good for someone who can pronounce the language well already, understands the basic grammar, and wants to expand vocabulary, and isn't so concerned about nuance of style.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of qualifications.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I think given the timestamp we're at, do you want to take a look at the Aesop?
I guess we better.
Text that you printed up there?
I guess we better. And maybe we'll put the full title of this article and a link. Maybe we'll put that in the show description, because, our more hardcore language aficionados,
yes,
they might want to go read this article themselves.
Indeed.
All right. So we have the cover page here, thanks to Google Books. This is The Fables of Aesop, adapted to the Hamiltonian system by an analytical and interlinear translation. I wonder what he means by analytical. We'll have to take a look. For the use of schools and private learners, by James Hamilton, author of the Hamiltonian system, published in London by A. Lott and Company, etc.
All right.
All right. So what does he say, Jeff, on the excerpted portion here? It's page 7, right at the top. This is Hamilton himself.
These books and these alone teach grammar and syntax, analytical translation being nothing else but practicing parsing, and these alone can therefore render wholly useless the grammar and dictionary. But when a number of them are known, the pupil may peruse a treatise on grammar in order to acquire the theory of what he already knows, the practice.
That's right.
So he's saying that kind of the traditional grammar study, you can do that, but that comes later.
That's right. And he says a little further on in the same page, let then the pupil be spared the useless labor of writing what are called exercises. When he has read a dozen volumes in any language, he may then be directed to try his power of writing it and have his faults of grammar, syntax, or idiom redressed by the oral instructions of his teacher. Thus he will be perfected in grammar in a few lessons. That seems a little optimistic.
Very optimistic. Yeah.
Jim, the getting by heart the Latin poets is also worse than useless, besides being an absolute deception. No, it isn't. I disagree. Arma verbum quecano Troiae qui primus ab ordris, right? It's just... It's so beautiful, even if you don't know exactly what it means. It can pull you on to learn more of it.
I think that, didn't we learn that Hamilton himself began as a businessman?
Yes.
So I think he's coming at
a little pragmatism.
Very pragmatic, right? He doesn't care about the artistry or the...
That's true. On the other hand, there are a lot of... Historically, there have been a number of great businessmen who were amateurs in the classics and contributed a lot.
Yes.
So I'm hesitant to say it's that he was a businessman.
Maybe I'm painting with too cynical of a brush.
Maybe.
Right.
And then finally, he says, the being able to repeat any author by heart supposes our having become familiar with him by frequent reading for our pleasure, and not the getting portions by heart through fear of punishment or shame.
And that's one thing I like about this is that I think it was... Locke or one of the others that said that part of the problem with learning a language is that it's not fun. It's supposed to be fun.
It's chained to the oar. Well, I know, but images and games and things like that.
Yeah,
I think that's going to make it more fun than just a lot of reading a kind of garbled English syntax.
Right. Yeah. Agreed.
I don't know. So let's look at the first page. Okay. We've got Aesopi Fabulae. And the first one is Fabula Prima, Aquila et Vulpes, right? The eagle and the wolf. So then I guess what we have here is a listing of the first sentence, and then I included on the second page the interlinear. So if you want to take a look at both pages, we've got first he gives, very early on in the volume, he gives the Latin without any glossing whatsoever. Then, later on in the book, he gives us a complete gloss of the fable. You want to read the first sentence unglossed?
Yes. Aquila et vulpes initia amicitia propese in vicem habitare decreverunt confirmationem amicitiae facientes familiaritatem.
Right.
All right.
Right. So then, on the second page, where we actually see Hamilton's method in practice... an eagle and a fox, right? So that's Aquila et Vulpes. Amicitia inita, friendship being entered into. So that is an ablative absolute. Right? An ablative absolute. Determined mutually to dwell near themselves, decreverunt in vicem habitare propese, making familiarity a confirmation of friendship, facientes familiaritatem confirmationem amicitiae.
All right, so there's some messing around with the Latin word order
to
try to make it more Englishy.
That's correct. Yep. There's a lot of that, with the exception of the ablative absolute, which he keeps in a more natural place, the amicitia inita.
Right.
But then, like you said, he has fudged the Latin syntax to make it more manageable. So if you're looking at this, what do you learn from this as a reader? I suppose you learn that Aquila means eagle, Vulpes means fox, Amicitia means friendship, and I guess some things like that.
And I guess you're also, even by flipping the word order around, you're getting some sort of sense of which words are receiving the action.
Yes,
right.
I guess
you're seeing what's the object without knowing what an accusative is.
Right. But what do you think about this? He translates in his interlinear gloss propese. That's the preposition prope with the accusative se. He translates that as near themselves. Does that make any sense? Maybe it did in the 19th century. If we were to say, Jeff and Dave, friendship being entered into, determined mutually to dwell near themselves. That's not how we would take it in English.
No.
Right? Determined to live near each other.
In the same neighborhood.
Yeah, in the same, near each other.
Right.
So now, I've gotten some meaning for say, but this meaning is very specific to the context.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a weak link here. I mean, we're just one sentence in, but it's clear that to me that he's saying, well, there's no artistry here. He's just trying to kind of get you to see what the base meaning of these words are.
As simple as possible.
As simple as possible, yeah.
Well, how about I read the Latin for the second sentence, and then you read the English interlinear below.
Okay.
And we'll see what we think of that. Itaque aquila fixit nidum super alta arbore.
Therefore, the eagle fixed a nest upon a high tree.
Right. All right. So the word order, right, is subject, aquila, verb, fixit, object, nidum, just like English, right? Mm-hmm. It's amazing, how it fits the English word order. And I guess the one criticism we might make is, while fixed, to fix a nest, does mean to fasten something to something else, right? That isn't maybe the first meaning that comes to people's minds. Maybe it was in the 19th century. I don't know.
I mean, in the previous sentence, familiaritatem, familiarity, confirmationem, confirmation. I think he's encouraging to associate things with derivatives,
right?
To make it as easy as possible,
right?
But yeah, fixed as opposed to build, create, make.
Yes, even attached or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But to be fair to Hamilton, in the original, right, which he gives very early on in the book, he has a more Latinate word order. He doesn't change it until later on when you see the gloss.
Right.
So I guess you can go back and forth.
Yep.
And I should say that I do use this method. I don't write it out, but I do use this method when I teach Latin. And I learned it from my friend Nancy Llewellyn. And she says that the first thing you do is a recitatio, right? Read it through once in Latin. The second thing you do is an anodatio, an untying, to unknot it. And she prescribes just this method. Reword it in English syntax. The third step is explicatio, which means try to give a Latin equivalent for each Latin word. So for aquila, we would say something like avis. Mm-hmm. We would say magna avis. It's a big bird. Magna avis quae in montibus habitat, a big bird that lives in the mountains.
Yes.
And then the last thing that you do is you give a recitatio altera, a second reading, where you go back to the original word order, not the English syntax.
Gotcha.
Now, I think it's worked really well whenever I've used that method. And the one difference is it tries to stay in the target language, whereas Hamilton goes immediately into the English.
Yep.
Pretty much the second or even the first step.
Fascinating stuff, Dave. But
I agree.
We're up against the clock. We got to get out of here.
All right.
And this is a perfect segue because, Dave, before we get out of here, tell us about your methods of teaching Latin and Greek that anybody can access.
All right. So let me tell you a little bit about that. The YouTube channel, youtube.com/Latin per diem, has almost now 2,200 individual free lessons. They are between 4 and 6 minutes in length, and I cover a wide variety of source authors, original authors, from antiquity, Caesar, Sallust, Cicero, Virgil, Livy, Terence, Seneca, etc. Late antiquity, no Apuleius yet. I need to do some Apuleius. Sorry, Jeff.
That's all right. I'm okay.
Is this show the Jeff Winkle experience?
No, I would say quite the opposite.
I was thinking it was. And then we have we've got the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, and so forth. So you can go check those out. And if you like the free instruction, go to the website, latinperdiem.com, and think about signing up for one of my classes to learn some Latin. Now, for the Greek also, I'm combining very soon the two websites into one. So the main website is having a huge overhaul, and Moss Method materials are going to be hosted very soon at latinperdiem.com. Maybe that doesn't matter so much to the listener. The bottom line...
A one-stop shop.
That's correct.
Fantastic.
Thank you. The bottom line is, if you want to learn Latin and Greek, and why would you not want to, I can really help you. Please give it a look.
Excellent. And Dave, we got to thank some people before
Absolutely.
we get out of here. Mishka, our wonderful engineer, kind of puts this all together in record time, and one of the I was going to say unsung hero, but I like to think that
we like to sing her praises.
Sing her praises.
That's right.
And also Ken Tamplin and Scott Van Zen. They're the guys behind the great rockin' music you hear.
The blazing arpeggios.
Yes,
you betcha.
Great stuff.
Thank you so much for that. And Jeff, what's on tap for next week?
I think it's open. You had brought up during the show maybe doing a couple of Ovidian vignettes. I was open to that.
That's good. We got to get back to Mahru at some point,
or in Richard's.
That's right.
Probably one of those three.
Okay,
I would guess.
It sounds good.
Yep.
And Jeff, if they want to get in touch with us, what ought they to do?
Yeah, they can write to you, Dave at adnauseam.com. Don't forget that V.
And you can throw in the secret code word Quatuor, Quattuor, if you want to enter the drawing to win the Ratio 4.
Please do.
If you want to get in touch with Jeff, and I think you should do that. The guy needs some encouragement after all.
Please.
Jeff at adnauseam.com. Do not forget the V in nauseam. And you can go to our website. You can lurch with merch, pick out a T-shirt, a hat, something like that to show that you are taking in the classics.
And keeping them down.
All right. Yep. And Jeff, I think you have the gustatory parting shot for this week.
I do. This comes from one Clifton Fadiman. I have no idea who this is, but apparently he wrote at one point, cheese, milk's leap towards immortality.
That's funny.
That's great.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.